Hello, this is a video I didn't think I'd be making today. I've just finished editing the About the Channel video, and while I was going through that footage I realised I'd said a few things in the video that really needed expanding on for anyone that's watching, so that if they don't know what I'm talking about, they can have a quick reference to go and watch. The main one that I've been looking at is when I talk about Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I'm aware that some people may not know who he is, or the general surge in interest that's happened with him since sort of 2016. And also I wanted to give a kind of a brief introduction to how Jordan B. Peterson influences me in the context of what I'm trying to do with my life. So this is going to be a very brief introduction to him, and it will be brief and it will maybe a bit rough around the edges, and I'm going to read from my iPad. However, once I've done that little bit of reading, then I'm going to talk about what has happened to me since I've been watching his content and listening to what he's saying, and how I initially found out about him. So Jordan B. Peterson was born on June the 12th in 1962 in Edmonton, Canada, and he grew up in Fairview, Alberta, which is also in Canada. Obviously, there's a lot more about his life leading up to when he became a professor at the University of Toronto. However, if you need more information or you'd like more information, I'll stick some links in the description below. As I just mentioned, he is a professor at the University of Toronto. I believe he's on like a sabbatical at the moment while he's doing like a book tour and various other speaking engagements. But he was also an associate professor at Harvard University. He's a clinical psychologist and an author, and there's really two books that he's written. And the first one is Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, and I'm going to read directly from the iPad now. So from my understanding, this book is an academic project. It took a long time to write, and Wikipedia states, and I know Wikipedia cannot always be trusted, whichever way you swing, but Wikipedia describes the book as a comprehensive theory about how people construct meaning, beliefs, and make narratives using ideas from various fields, including mythology, religion, literature, philosophy, and psychology, in accordance to the modern scientific understanding of how the brain functions. Now, I have got a PDF of the book, and Jordan Peterson actually makes that available for you on his website. And my understanding of the book is that we all share stories which play out in the modern world in movies, films and books, and those stories all resonate with us, and they all kind of live inside us, and they come from somewhere, and all those stories are also in religion and ancient myths, and we play those stories out in our lives, and it's looking at how those stories kind of map onto brain functions. I think I need to read the book again. I didn't go to university. I'm not a super academic person, so I maybe have butchered that a bit. But that's kind of my understanding and a general overview. Then the next book is 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote for Chaos, which is his latest book, and essentially this is I won't say watered down. It's a condensed version of a Quora post Dr. Peterson put up. Someone asked him what are things that everyone should know, or what are the rules for life, and he put a list of 42, and then this was condensed down to 12, and it's become a massive bestseller. I've got a signed copy of it in the house. I'm not going to go through all of that because there's probably a million videos about that stuff. This video is really about how I found out about Jordan Peterson and how he's affected me, and again this will be brief. So I first saw Jordan Peterson and found out about him when I watched this video.
Right. So there's a reason I'm defending freedom of speech. And the reason for that is quite straightforward. The reason I'm defending freedom of speech is because that's how people get their opinions, settle their opinions in a civil society. And if we lose that, with Bill C-16 and the surrounding legislation.
I will answer your question, okay? I've studied Nazism for a very long time. It's been 4 decades, and I understand it very well. And I can tell you that there's some awful people lurking in the corners, and they're ready to come out. And if the radical left keeps pushing the way
that sounds very much like a
they're
threat.
going to come.
That sounds very much like a threat. That sounds very much like a threat. Would you like to disavow the physical violence? Trans people were physically assaulted at this rally in your name. Would you like to disavow that violence?
Yes.
So you wish that didn't happen, and you want to, and I'm going to post this online, that you would like people to not to be more accommodating of trans people and people of color at your events in future.
I would like.
Well, when I watched that video, I was just completely transfixed about with how the people in it were so passionate about what they were talking about. And when I first watched it, I heard the Dr Peterson talking, and then kind of the protesters talking, and they just seemed to be like completely talking past one another, and just kind of not listening. And then I watched it a few times, and obviously from that video spawned various other videos. Every time I watched them, the points that Jordan Peterson seemed to be making, they just weren't being kind of acknowledged by the protesters. They weren't being, I don't even think they were being thought about, and it seemed that the message that was even if it was bang wrong, even if the point was bang wrong, I don't even think they were listening to even recognise that that point was bang wrong. It was just like it was just like anything that was said by this man, who I didn't even know who he was. Anything that was said by him was just immediately wrong, and it was kind of interesting. So I saw that in 2016, I think, maybe early 2017. So after watching those videos and seeing various rehashings of them, and then seeing people's opinions of them, and seeing this guy kind of try to express himself and being shouted down, it got me interested into what he was talking about. So I visited Jordan Peterson's website. I found they had the PDF of Maps of Meaning, the book. I downloaded it, started to read it. Like many things in my life, then I sort of started and then stopped. And I noticed that he had these really long playlists of like hours and hours and hours of footage of him lecturing. And again, I started to watch them, and then I stopped. And to be honest, I wasn't really in a good space to watch them at that point. However, on the 21st of January 2017, Sam Harris released a podcast with Jordan Peterson, What is Truth? And I remember I was in my back garden at the time, and I was building an office in my back garden. I think I was doing something really laborious, like I was digging a trench for the electrical cable that goes in it. And in England, it's got to be a certain depth for the type of cable that's going in. And I just had this thing. I was just pickaxing down or digging this trench, and it was really wet and muddy. It was January in England. And I was listening to this podcast of Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, and it was great at first because they discussed in the first bit of the podcast, first kind of 20 minutes, they discussed the general the way that what I'd seen in the videos before, where Jordan Peterson gets shouted down, and I think Sam Harris had also experienced the same thing. So I was listening to that, and that was great because that was easy listening. That was fine. But in this podcast, they start to go into what is truth.
That we could recognize for the moment that we're starting with different claims of truth.
But I don't think we are. I think you're simply deciding at the end of the day to say that any truths that led us down a path where we suffered unnecessarily or died weren't true.
Right. You have to choose what you mean by true. You have to. And I'm not accepting the same definition of truth that you operate under.
And my God, if you listen to that podcast, it is like they're butting heads the whole time. And at that point, I was very much I was not a militant atheist, but I would describe myself as an atheist, fully in the Sam Harris camp. And myth and religion and all that stuff was, as far as I was concerned, was total bunk. So after I listened to that podcast, I was like, oh God, I think I'm going to dispense with even listening to Jordan Peterson. I can't be bothered anymore, because he's talking about myths as if they're true and all the rest of it. However, there was something about that podcast that drew me in, so I listened to it again. And on the second listening to it, I started to listen to what Jordan Peterson was talking about, something about when he said if something is true enough, and that really bothered me, because I'm like, what can be true enough? Something has to be true. It can either be true or it's not. But that really sent me down a road of thinking. And so I started to read more about Jordan Peterson, started to watch more of his lectures, and then obviously started to pop up everywhere. Joe Rogan and all everywhere. I mean, you can't miss him now. And then Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson did their second podcast, and that was a much better conversation because they were able to, they understood where their disagreements were, and actually those disagreements actually turned into a tour in the end, where they've had moderators I went to one in UK with Douglas Murray at the O2, and that's been really interesting to watch and listen to. Okay, so that's a whole thing about about Jordan Peterson, which I'm sure a lot of you know about. But where does he sit, and where is he important within the context of this channel? Okay, well, I had some, I don't know what I want to call them, but I guess I had some difficulty with my mental health in 2016, 2017. And I don't want to describe it too much in this video, because I think I want to make a series of videos about what I experienced, and maybe I can, in the process of making those videos, I'll be able to understand actually what happened to me a little bit more, because I don't think it's an unusual thing, and I think lots of people go through it. But essentially, I kind of descended into nihilism, and I just had a really difficult time, because lots of thoughts and themes and narratives I've had since I was a kid really came bubbling up to the surface and pushed their way through, and it wasn't a great time at all, not for me or my partner or anything really. So alongside my contention with Jordan Peterson about what is truth, I also noticed that there was advice, I guess we would call it, that he was giving out, or not really giving out, but he was highlighting areas of life where people struggle, and I saw that he was highlighting some of the areas where I was struggling, and without being without pushing his advice on anyone, or without saying this is exactly what you need to do, he described a way of thinking about certain aspects of life, and for me certain aspects of my life, which I can state now and I can tell you now that has categorically helped me overcome some huge hurdles that were in my way. So I can tell you that Jordan Peterson has helped me to overcome some quite large demons and some quite large issues that I had in my head. And because of that, I have become a better person. Now, I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson made me a better person, but there were some things that he said that I was missing, and they kind of filled the gaps for me and helped me. And that's what this channel is about, and that's where Jordan Peterson, the context of him, sits. So you'll find some channels that are about his political stances, and Jordan Peterson destroys this and that and the other. That's not where I'm going with this. I want to highlight how I've taken what he has highlighted, whether he thought them up originally or whether they've been around forever, it doesn't matter. He highlighted it for me, and how I have made the changes in my life necessary, and how it's affected me, and how I'm putting them into practice. So that's who Jordan Peterson is in the context of this channel. I will put plenty of links below. If you've watched all the way through, thank you so much. That was quite a difficult video to make, so I'm just going off the cuff, and I don't want to say things that are going to sound, or I'm going to regret later, but I think that was okay. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.